Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. Today, sometimes the well runs a little bit dry. Sometimes you're working on a couple of things and you need to sort of fall back on the tried and true, the old faithful. And that right now on BookTube is the video format of a booktuber reading negative reviews, one-star reviews of their favorite books. So that's what we're doing today. One of the joys of having your own channel is that instead of just watching trends, you can join in. So I never really felt any desire to do this, but last night I watched another one of these and I thought, you know what, let me give it a shot. But I'm going to do it a little bit differently on my channel because I have a tendency to yap for a long period of time. So I'm going to limit myself to just a couple of books, and all of those books are going to be books that I've talked about on this channel before. And I've talked positively about all of these books before. Although, part of me just wanted to read and then tear apart the grandmothers who were writing 5-star reviews for The Agony and the Ecstasy. And then I saw that there were 42,000 5-star reviews of The Agony and the Ecstasy on Goodreads, which is so scary because that means that there are 42,000 stark raving lunatics just running around on our streets. So that's a little terrifying to me. But anyway, we're gonna stick to books that I did like and defend them against these very just personally insulting, I think. Or personally problematic takedowns that I found on Goodreads. Now, the first one is going to be The Monk by Matthew Lewis, because I just talked about this literally a couple hours ago on this channel. Loved this book, had a fantastic time reading it. One of the things that I mentioned in that review for it, or at least vlog for it, was that I thought it was thoroughly entertaining, and I thought that there really was no way for anyone to read a book like this and not at least find it entertaining. Not enjoyable, fine, but not pleasant, we'll say, sure, but not an entertaining on some sort of base level. I just can't imagine. There's just too many things that happen in it. But let's see. I screenshotted a couple of reviews here, and we'll just take a look. The first one comes from someone named Makek, I don't know. But he says, written by a 19-year-old in 10 weeks, the guy obviously had a feeling that he was writing for the ages. He tackled the subject of downfall. However, it is obvious that he's extremely anti-Catholic. The perils and subplots he devises for the poor monk are just too much. The Gothic writing doesn't help. Read at your own risk. And what's funny about this one is that it reads more to me like an advertisement for the book than a 1-star review. You're saying it's anti-Catholic? You're saying that he devises subplots for devises perils for the poor monk that are too much for him to handle, and that it's written gothically, and that I should read it at my own risk? That sounds awesome. Honestly, there's nothing anti-Catholic about me, by the way, but I do, you know, from my other videos, if you watch them, that I do like anything that's anti-Catholic or anti-Protestant, because it reminds me of everything that I've been reading in the Reformation, which I find really interesting. And yes, I agree. The perils that he subjects his monk to are too much, and I'm sure he would agree with you as well. He doesn't really catch a break throughout the entire book. But I love it. I think it's great. I can understand why you wouldn't, but to me, all of those things that he says here are actually would encourage me to read the book, not stay away from it. This person, Nikki, just vitriolic. She says, "Flush the toilet. This was truly awful. I was determined to finish it even though I was bored rigid by it. But then I realized within 40 pages of the end that I had been in a bad mood the whole time that I had been reading it." Okay. "The day I flung it across the room unfinished was truly a beauteous day. Good story, bad style." Wow, Nikki, I don't know what to tell you. I don't know why reading it in a bad mood is is Matthew Lewis's fault, but I do understand what you're saying. Sometimes when we're in a bad mood, we just need to throw a book across the floor. I understand. Although I do feel like if you're saying that the story is good, maybe don't flush it down the toilet. Even if the style is bad, maybe the good story saves it a little bit. You say it's a good story and you're giving it a 1-star review and you're saying that we should flush it down the toilet? Seems a little bit harsh, I'm not going to lie. Then we've got Jessica reviews. She says, I hate this book. It's extremely well written. Okay, well now Jessica is saying that it's well written. Nikki said that it wasn't. And I can appreciate the critiques of society Lewis is making, but it's brutal to read. There are scenes I had to take a break from reading. Me too, because they were so triggering. I couldn't get the story out of my head for days after reading. It leaves you feeling manipulated and violated and angry, and I think it's supposed to. Honestly, I respect this review a lot, even though you don't like it. I respect it because, yeah, I mean, it is intense. It's surprisingly intense, frankly. And if that leaves you feeling manipulated, violated, and angry, I think, I think it might be that is the case, and it might be that you don't like that, and I totally understand that. So if you're having that reaction, I think that it's because you actually read the book, and maybe you just don't like those feelings, which, more power to you. That's fine. Then we've got Kay. Kay says, although the novel is considered a classic Gothic novel published in the height of their popularity in 1796, I found it boring. I imagine that for its day, it was very shocking. You know what's funny is that I completely disagree with this because, one, I didn't find it boring, and two, I think it's shocking even today. I was thinking about it. I remember I've watched a lot of horror movies in my day, but I remember watching The Exorcist for the first time and being blown away by how scary it was as a horror movie. And I thought, it's amazing that this movie came out so many decades ago and it still holds up in terms of being disturbing. At least I thought it was. And it was certainly a lot more disturbing than so many contemporary horror movies, even horror movies that people say are really scary. Like, what was that one that came out a while ago and everyone watched? Long Legs. That one, there's so many horror movies like that are just not scary at all. And then I watched The Exorcist and was like, wow, does that hold up in terms of being a scary movie? And I thought The Monk really held up with that way too. I mean, no, I didn't find it boring at all, precisely because I did find it shocking. I mean, it does have, I think I mentioned in that review, or I keep saying review, and I know they're not reviews, they're just vlogs, or me chronicling my experience with the book. But in my experience, I mentioned that I was freaked out at the fact that the monk himself is sort of the final boss of all sexual predators, and so that does leave you feeling a little bit queasy because of how just messed up the guy is. And I thought that was really effective and actually quite shocking because he does stoop to a level that I just was not expecting him to stoop to. So I disagree with Kay on this one. I included this one. This is Zoe's very sad review of Father and Son. I mentioned that this was one of my favorite books of the year, or my favorite book that I read this year, and she says, if this is what reading in college is like, then I want to go home. I think this says a lot about me too, in the sense that I liked it. But I can see why it would give you the feeling of sitting in like a seminar and slaving away at a book that you hate. So I hope Zoe finds better things to read, or things that she will enjoy reading more. The next we have All the King's Men by Robert Penn Warren. I had quite the experience with this book. I shot a reading vlog of this one as well. The first review is a long review by Corey. He says, honestly, a letdown. I was really looking forward to reading this book, especially given the story/setting and the wonderful reviews I read on Goodreads. However, I had to stop reading it just under halfway through. I am at a loss as to why Warren won the Pulitzer in 1947 for this novel. The writing is atrocious. There are countless long run-on sentences, some of them run for half a page, literally, that are continuously overwrought in metaphor and simile. I'm a fan of florid writing, but Warren's attempt is so awkward and it fails miserably. On more than one occasion, I found myself questioning what he was initially describing after going on and on and on and on and on. You get my point. There were, however, brief moments of beautiful writing, but overall I was smothered by his constant tangential ramblings. I can understand a little bit of what he's talking about here. If there are moments in the book where Warren sort of engages in some flights of fancy, I would say, and lets himself go on playing with words a little bit and getting rather poetic. I liked it because of some of the things that I've read before and enjoyed. It reminded me of some things that I think are really interesting in terms of writing. I don't think it's necessarily an example of the best writing can be, because I think that in this case it is up to a person's individual taste. And so if this is not within your taste, I understand that. Corey goes on to then say, as far as the story is concerned, it never really captivated me. I never felt dragged into the story at all. The pacing was painfully slow. And it became more and more laborious to keep turning the pages. With regards to the characters, well, talk about one-dimensional. The dialogue of Stark, oh my gosh, in particular, is horrendously repetitive, as he manages to say the exact same thing over and over and over again in certain scenes. No one is really likable in this book. Well, that I agree with. And while I understand that this is okay, I felt next to nothing for any of the characters. Yeah, I completely disagree. First of all, I was captivated from the jump. You can see that in the reading vlog. I read the first chapter and was like, holy smokes, this is incredible. So I definitely disagree with that. I was captivated from the first moment. As far as the pacing being painfully slow, again, couldn't disagree more. I thought that the book was written at an extremely fast clip. It's long, so there are moments when things aren't necessarily like smashing into each other and blowing up and, going crazy. But I definitely think that the book is paced very interestingly, because over those 600 pages, you're flashing forward and backward in time. You're going in and out of certain stories. You're following different plots. I think it's fascinating the way that it's paced, personally. If you find it slow at points, I guess, but the first two chapters, my goodness, breakneck pace for me. And they're long chapters, and they flew by for me. As far as the characters not being likable, I agree. All of these characters are unlikable. But what's weird is that I do feel something for them. I end up caring for them, even in spite of the fact that they are extremely unlikable. So I disagree mightily with that. Then he says, I hate not finishing a book. I really do. I feel as though one should tough it out and finish what you started. No, you don't have to do that. Life is too short to do that. There's way more books than you'll end up reading anyway. You can DNF it and come back to it later if you want to, but you don't need to tough out a book that you don't like, unless you're reading it for school or something like that, or you're doing research. But if it's just for your own enjoyment and you're hating it, you can put it down. He says, however, I will be breaking that sentiment with this novel. I decided to give this novel 1 star. I'd like to find at least some redeeming quality in a book. In this case, there were moments of excellent prose, which is probably why I continued to stick around. But in this case, it was next to impossible. Wow. Maybe I will revisit this novel in the future, although it won't be for a while. Interesting. I wonder what it was about the plot that he didn't like and what he found boring about it. Again, the reason I ask is because I don't know where that's coming from at all. But I guess it's interesting to read. Mr. Newman says, I hated every minute of this book and finished it solely out of spite. Well, that's really not a good reason to read a book, Mr. Newman. I don't think, or at least a fictional piece of literature like Robert Penn Warren's All the King's Men. I don't think you necessarily need to do that. I felt inspired to read it after a joyful visit to New Orleans, thinking I might learn something about Huey Long, allegedly the inspiration for the book. Louisiana politics or just Louisiana? Nope, on all accounts. To make matters worse, 90% of the book is stream of consciousness, babble, with some predictable, banal dialogue, boring, uninspired characters, predictable storyline. Surely you don't think that the storyline is predictable. You were able to predict everything that happened in this book. I think you're just saying that. Rubbish. I think you're just being a little bit of a hater, honestly. I think that that's not. I would like to press Mr. Newman on particularly the predictability of the book. Maybe if you read a lot of political, I don't know, satires, intrigue novels, or whatever, maybe some of those aspects are familiar to you. But I mean, there's some stuff in the book that for me came out of nowhere, and I think overall the book takes some really interesting twists and turns. I mean, who would have anticipated, for example, that there would be basically a book within a book, and you would study about some random slave-holding woman who, out of fear, maliciousness, sells her property, basically, into a worse sort of servitude. I mean, it comes out of nowhere. It's a fascinating detour. I mean, it's not predictable at all. But anyway, Matthew says, worst book ever. Surely that is not true. Surely that is not true because Robert Penn Warren did not write Atlas Shrugged, and that is the worst book ever. Matthew says it's the worst book ever. Then he says this author took a horribly bland and tedious plot and made it even worse by adding some of the least necessary details in every space possible. I mean, come on. He took multiple pages to describe a road. It wasn't even important at all to the story. I don't remember what road he's talking about there. Not to mention that he gave the ending away in the first chapter. Then it wasn't even a surprise when anyone died. Okay. Okay. If you have a copy of this book, please burn it immediately. And then Jim jumps in and says, great review. I feel the same way. Burn this book. Okay. We'll just move on. Don't burn this book. Put it in a book library, a little book library, okay? I don't think it's worth burning. Sarah says, this type of book makes me a literature major understand why people hate reading. Okay, it's too much negativity. Let's move on to The Age of Wonder. I talked a couple times about how much I love this book on this channel, and I found some funny negative reviews for it. Mainly because they all revolve around the same thing, which I remember what they were referring to, but I have to impress on you, despite what these reviews might make you think, it's a small portion of the book. It's really not that substantial. Ariana says, ugh, DNF. This has been on my TBR list forever. So excited to finally get a hold of the audiobook, and then what? I cannot believe there are not more comments about the sexual content of this book. As I mentioned, the sexual content of this book is limited to a very small section of the book. So I believe, Ariana, that's why there hasn't been many people commenting on it. But then she says, when the talk of sexual favors between explorers and indigenous people first began, I excused it because obviously this is a known part of history and relevant to the story, but I felt like it became more and more explicit to the point that I was very uncomfortable listening to it in the car with the kids. Maybe you shouldn't be listening to it with the kids in the car. Yes, I agree. Thinking over the book, I do think that the sexual content in the book would be a little bit uncomfortable. Put on Bluey or something. I'm sure your kids would much rather watch Bluey than read Richard Holmes or listen to The Age of Wonder. Let's see. And soon stopped it altogether. While there may be those who say you can't talk about the lives of explorers without mentioning the extent of their sexual encounters, I just felt like it was unnecessary and awkward. DNF for me, and I didn't want to forget why it was a DNF, so here we are. Okay. Yes, well, Ariana, it does bring up a good point. Do not listen to the audiobook of this with your kids on a road trip. I do agree with that. The sexual favors, I don't necessarily think I would want to listen to that with my kids in the car either. I don't have kids, by the way, but just imagining that I did, I don't think I would. Marianne says, I wanted to like this book, but after a few pages I realized that if it were a movie, it would be rated R for vulgarity and sensuality. Yes, I agree. Probably. Yeah, probably. I closed the book and returned it to the library, feeling very disappointed because I loved the concept and wanted to learn more about the Age of Wonder. Well, Marianne, you sound to me like a Agony and the Ecstasy enjoyer. That is a very G-rated book, if you don't mind some weird innuendo about Michelangelo maybe having some physical relationship with his marble statues. But yes, I do think that it would be rated R, although I don't think it's particularly vulgar and sensual, no, but I know what you mean. Scott says, I read the first chapter and was appalled at how sex was to me flippantly spoken of. Scott, what are we doing here? It's so strange because it's not what kind of prudishness are we doing here? I stopped reading. Again, despite what the reviews here might say, the sexual content of The Age of Wonder is far from that prevalent, I would say. And it does form a relevant component of the book because it does underscore what was an important and not insubstantial relationship between the explorers during the Age of Exploration were doing when they were encountering the indigenous populations of the places that they were exploring, how they were relating to them, how they were being violent against them, how they were taking advantage of them, but also how they were sort of cooperating with them at certain times and doing and trading with them and living with them and working with them and yes, having sex with them and how they would go about doing that and what it was that they thought about that. I mean, all of that I think is very fascinating and very relevant to bring up. I don't know what about that it went too far. Although, again, if I had kids in the car, maybe I would avoid doing that. But anyway, I thought that was fun. Those are some negative reviews of books I liked. I still stand by my recommendations. I think I've been looking at the comments for my monk reading vlog, and people seem to be excited about that, or they seem to be leaving positive comments about the book. So I think a bunch of people do appreciate that book, and I certainly liked it. I do think that Edmund Goss's Father and Son is very interesting, even if it is a bit dry. It makes you feel like you're in a college seminar. And The Age of Wonder is great. And what was the other one we talked about? All the King's Men. Yeah. Not boring. I don't think it's boring. I really, really don't think it's boring. Confusing? Maybe. Maybe a little bit overwritten at times, but certainly there is no flaw to All the King's Men that prevents me from liking it, because I personally had a really gripping experience with it. So anyway, that's the video. That's another one to add to the extremely long list of videos out there about reading 1-star reviews of books that I like or the certain presenter enjoys, but I'm glad that I was able to participate in it. So I will see you as soon as possible, hopefully tomorrow. Thank you, BookTube.